Good evening. My name is Amit Tandon, and I'm going to be your host for the remainder of the evening. I see a lot of new faces in the audience today, and that's partly because the last two sessions and what my commitment to Quorum was that we'll kind of do a series on women in finance, and therefore you've got people who gravitate towards that sector rather than the social sector. I also see some familiar faces like Alok Vajpayee is there, and I must say he was a catalyst in getting me to kind of do this show with Quorum. So thanks, Alok, for being here. So let me kind of jump straight into this. So the conversation, as I see it, is going to be about two journeys. One is Shashank's individual journey, how he was kind of moved from a small city to IIT to Switzerland, and now he's kind of gone a full 360 degrees to his roots and from where he started. And the second is about the train journey, which I read about and saw some videos, and which is truly, truly fascinating. Before we jump into the first leg of the conversation, which is about his own personal journey, I'd like Shashank, just for the audience here, and I see there are a lot of your friends present out here, but just for those who are not familiar with the Jagrati Yatra, can you just give a bird's eye view of that, and that will help us kind of get the first leg of the conversation focused on your personal journey. So about the Yatra.
So firstly, I have to make a confession. This Monday afternoon, I was, how shall I say, stumbled out of a hospital thanks to Gauri ji because I contracted dengue. So if today I stumble a bit and I fluster a bit, blame it on the platelets, okay? For this event, I must thank Gopal because he was the person who persuaded me to say that, Shashank, I think this is a cozy forum and I think it really has risen to that coziness. And you should come here and speak about the book even before it gets published so that people understand that. And I also want to thank many friends who are here today. And Amit, thank you for you because yesterday you spoke to me and that gave me a lot of confidence to be here. Now to your question, many years back, actually precisely 25 years back, I was at that time in London. I thought I had a very privileged upbringing because my father was in the army and I didn't get educated in very elite schools, but I finally managed to get admission to a very prestigious college. And therefore the 50th anniversary of India's independence, when it was coming, I felt that I should do something for it which broke new ground. And that's when we organized a very harebrained train journey. And I must thank my father-in-law who's here and Gauri, my wife, because at that time we didn't have an army of people to help us. And we pulled off this Azad Bharat Rail Yatra, which was a one-off journey, which was to celebrate the 50th anniversary at that time. Our kids were, my daughter was about to be born. So we were at that stage where we said, let's get something done for the country who's given us so much. And that's the genesis of the Jagrati Yatra. And then 7 years later, I wrote a book in 2007. And that was called India, A Journey Through a Healing Civilization. It was published by HarperCollins. People like Gopal really liked it. Others also liked it. And therefore, that started a trend which said that let's do it every year. And that is the genesis of Jagrati Yatra. But Jagrati Yatra started in 2008, but with a very different motto. The origins of that Azad Bharat Rail Yatra was how do we look at the future? The actual motto was discover the future of India. But in this case, we discovered three Indias, a top India which is doing well, a bottom India which is poor, but a middle India which is, I think today 800 million people and the subject of my book. And that India was something that was raring to go, and therefore we felt that we should promote entrepreneurship in that India, and hence the journey. So the journey has been going on for the last 15 years, including 2 years when COVID lay us low, because we did it digitally. And in the 13 years otherwise that we did physically, we take a full train. It's 19 bogies. We get 500 young people from across the country. There are normally 15,000 applicants. Thanks to COVID, last year there were 22,000 applicants. And this year, even now, because we're doing it a bit preponed with G20, it's already 20,000 applicants. So these 5 100 applicants are from tier 2, tier 3 districts, 40% are women. We put them on a train in Mumbai. I must confess one thing, that an idea such as this can only be executed in Mumbai, because it has got that special combination of northern hustle and southern integrity. And I think that combination really allowed us every year to do something pretty profound. And that is why the Yatra continues, because to start something is fine, but to take 800 people, 8,000 kilometers every year is not an easy job. And I think Bombay spirit makes that possible. So we start from here, we go to Kanyakumari, Madurai, Bangalore, Chennai, Vizag, Behrampur, Nalanda, Devariya. Devariya is the only place where all 500 sleep off the train in the same village that I'm now living, my ancestral village. From there it goes to Delhi, Delhi to Tilonia, Sabarmati, where we have a valedictory. The train comes back to Mumbai. It's the world's largest train journey. It's been going on for the last 15 years. And I'm very proud that it has created 7,500 leaders who are, many of them are in this room, who are really doing something great and original for their country, not by giving just दान and दक्षिणा, लेकिन लोगों को स्वावलंबी कैसे बनाएं, कैसे लोगों में जो एक छुपा हुआ हनुमान है उसको कैसे जगाएं, किस प्रकार से उन लोगों को प्रोत्साहित करें जिसके पास शक्ति है लेकिन उसको उपेक्षित किया गया. How do we make sure that that ordinary boy or a girl who's in a small town or district, and to complete that story, and then I'll stop, 5 years back we decided that in the same village, which is one of 4 centers that we want to create, we have created an entrepreneurship center called Jagrati Enterprise Center Purvanchal. It's next to a beautiful banyan tree. All of you are invited to my village. I live there now, so you can easily come there. It's a very easy flight to Gorakhpur, and it's 45 minutes from there. So under the banyan tree, we have created the first phase of a center which is now going to incubate in the 15 odd districts enterprises and also create innovation. So that's a long-winded answer to your short question.
Thanks a lot. So look, there are some chairs in the front, so all of you at the back, I'd encourage you to come and sit in the front. You'll be a lot more comfortable, so do that. So, you know, please. So while everyone's resettling themselves, I'll kind of digress. So a couple of weeks ago, I wrote, I did this column for Business Standard in terms, the topic being that will AI replace corporate boards? And while researching for it, I kind of decided to ask ChatGPT this question, and it spewed out a 700-word answer, which I put there. And then when I was, Ria asked me to come and speak to you, I looked and I said, you've spoken at TED and you've spoken at Davos and so on and so forth. So maybe I don't need to do anything till you told me that, look, you are going to sit down and you are going to be, you know, given that you're just out of the hospital. So we are going to have a genuine conversation, not having, we're going to have a genuine conversation. I was hoping that, you know, you can talk about everything, and I kind of just sit here and nod and say good and, you know, introduce you and say thank you, but this is the way it is. Thank you for coming, particularly given the fact that you're just out of hospital, so it will take a strain, so we'll try and keep it a little bit easy. So look, I'm quite fascinated in terms of how you transformed from Davos man, if I may use the word. You were working with PwC, which is one of the big 4 audit firms and a very prominent consulting and advisory firm. You've spoken, as I said, at TED, you've spoken at the World Economic Forum. So I'm kind of quite curious about this journey. So what I'm going to do is just try and understand your growing up. So you've said that you're the son of an army officer, very decorated one, if I may say. He was deputy chief of the army staff, and so you would have been around in different cities, different schools. So did you get to see the real India when you were there, and were you kind of saying, look, this is what I want to embrace, or at that time you said that, look, this is what I want to get away from?
So I would say that cantonment kids are fairly protected. You know, we go to the Annex A and have hot dogs and watch English movies like I used to do at Ahmednagar. But I think I have to give credit to my parents, both my father and my mother, because they took us out of that hedge-lined suburbs of cantonments. And because they always brought us back to my village, which is now where I'm living, and also to where I was, I always saw the other side of a town like Sangrur. I think I surreptitiously saw the other side of a town like Ahmednagar, where the real India reside. And I think one of the best things that happened to me is that when my father got me admitted in Kendri Vidyalaya Ahmednagar when I was in 6th class, and I had just come out of Humayun Road modern school, junior modern school. I felt a bit awkward initially, but one of the best decisions that happened. Those 3 years were the best years of my life because I found the real India in my fellow class fellows. And I think I talk about it in my second chapter. The whole idea of Middle India actually probably subconsciously germinated from that moment in time, where I felt that there was another India, and I'll give you an example of that. So, for instance, there was a guy, my class fellow Ashok, it's his real name. He was a son of a Subadar major, always erect, always neatly dressed, and first in the class too. तो मुझे ऐसा लगा कि हम लोग जो कैंटोनमेंट वाले हैं अंग्रेजी झाड़ते हैं उनसे अच्छे तो यही हैं कि उनके पास उतना ज़्यादा साधन भी नहीं है बट दे आर एबल टू डू थिंग्स द सेम वे एज वी डू सो इट सडनली मेड the world very level. It made the world a place where there was a lot of human resources, if I may call them, of friends and families who were so amazing in their own different ways. And yet we could not recognize that because we were ensconced in our own small areas within the cantonment. So to answer your question, the country was laid bare to me because Patiala, Sangrur, Ambala, Ahmednagar, Devariya, Gorakhpur, Uti, of course I was not aware of myself when my father was in Uti. So that made me a Ghumakkada. So I became a wanderer at heart. And that exposed me to what finally became the Jagrati Yatra, which is that even when I was in my 11th class, I went for a public school athletic meet in HPS, Hyderabad Public School. And मैंने अपने दोस्तों से बोला चले यार साथ चलते हैं नीचे उटी उटी घूमते हैं. Nobody said. I ventured on my own. I started moving out on my own. I went to Corbett National Park, I remember once on my own when I was in 11th class. There was nobody there and I walked for 17 kilometers because my father's training and my mother's encouragement, because mothers are usually very protective. कहाँ जा रहे हो बच्चा, कहाँ जा रहे हो? तो इस हिसाब से उन्होंने जो हम लोग को एक छूट दी कि no, go and explore the country, probably was the reason. If I had been a typical army brat, I would probably not have exposed that. I think the second thing which happened because when you live around as an army cantonment, I think the conversations were always around nation building. चाहे वो पिताजी का हो, चाहे हमारे चाचा के हों, चाहे हमारे बाबा के हों. So that was always influencing. And Gopal, हम लोग बात करते हैं इसके बारे में, like his father was also in the services, how this generation has grown up with those stories. And perhaps it bubbled up at a certain point in our lives where we said, let's do something about it. And hence the yatra happened.
But before that, there's still a lot to ground to cover. So, you're kind of moving around, you're in Lucknow, you go to Delhi University, as you said, you didn't quite enjoy it, and from there you move to IIT. You're kind of moving away from, what I would describe today as, people who kind of go to Starbucks, watch Netflix. So you were kind of slowly getting sucked into that universe. So talk to me about that. Tell me a little bit, was it that because you were, I see from your profile that you were General Secretary of the Sports Club, or by whatever name it's known at, in IIT Delhi. So did that kind of keep you grounded, or were you kind of... Okay, BSA. So did that keep you grounded, or were you kind of getting sucked out? Because, I see that from there you kind of went to Schlumberger again, which couldn't have, it would have kind of kept you further away from the real India, if I may use the word, and then do Sons. So just walk me through some of these years and what was going through it. Did you not say, wow, Switzerland's a great country, I should be here? Because you had the qualifications. I'm sure you were financially independent by then. So you could have kind of been in London, America, wherever, and continued to stay there.
Yeah, and I think if I may preface what I'm going to say by saying that we are a country of great pilgrims. And pilgrimage means going out, not to conquer, but to return. And that's qualitatively different from what happened in Mayflower Children when 108 settlers went to the United States. So with that preface, let me say that you're right, that जब मैं कॉल्विन में था तो मेरे आदर्श थे प्रेमचंद, मेरे आदर्श थे शेखर एक जीवनी, मेरे आदर्श थे आनंद मठ. जब मैं कॉल्विन से, और कॉल्विन बाय द वे मतलब हॉइटी टॉइटी प्लेस है, लेकिन हिंदी बोर्ड का है, हिंदी एजुकेशन है। मैंने फिजिक्स केमिस्ट्री मैथ्स भी हिंदी से पढ़ी, जो मैंने गद्य और पद्य पढ़ा हिंदी का पढ़ा। तो वहाँ से जब मैं दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी गया, 1 साल पढ़ा हिंदू में, मुझे मज़ा ही नहीं आया। आई यूज्ड टू प्ले फुटबॉल, आई वाज अ गुड एथलीट एंड आई विल कम टू दैट इन अ मिनट। देन आई केम बैक टू IIT Delhi, was one of the best things that I did in my life, which is to take the JEE at the right time. Thanks to UP board, I cleared the JEE, I got a good rank, I got admission to IIT, which was my preferred Delhi. तो दिल्ली में there was a cultural displacement which happened. And that happened because in the first year itself, at the Rendezvous Festival, there was Pink Floyd and Beatles. I'd never even heard of them, right? But the need to fit in was so overpowering. मैं भी आर्मी का बच्चा था, तो ऐसा नहीं था कि मैंने कभी नहीं सुना था, but I'd heard it somewhere in the background. So slowly, you know, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance became the go-to book rather than Shekhar Ek Jeevani. So there was a metamorphosis. There was an intellectual moving away, to use your phrase, from where my roots were or where I was. But as I said, as a pilgrim, I knew that I could always come back. So then sports was a big anchor for me. I was a very good athlete when I was in Colvin. I became the Jahangirabad gold medalist. And there's a story in that when I joined Colvin in 8th class, I won't name him, but there was a senior who was in 11th class. Amazing athlete. And he would always win the all-round championship. When I went to 12th class, he was still in 12th class because he kept failing. तो एक दिन मैं KD सिंह बाबू स्टेडियम में, मैं रेलवेज के साथ 200, 400 और 100 का, आई बिकेम अ गुड एथलीट। तो मैं KD सिंह बाबू स्टेडियम में प्रैक्टिस कर रहा था, तो वो निकला बाहर, उसने बोला, त्रिपाठी सुनते तुम बहुत प्रैक्टिस कर रहे हो। बोला देखो, तुम भारी भरकम तुम्हारा शरीर है, जैवलिन, डिस्कस और इन सब चीज़ में ले जाओगे, लेकिन 100, 200, 400 में तुम्हें हराऊंगा। He was shocked. Nobody had beaten him for 100, 200 meter. I beat him. हल्ला मच गया. So from there, when I came to Delhi University, then I went to IIT. I became the Deputy General Secretary. There's also a story. Briefly, I'll tell you because I'm very proud of it. हमने कभी इंटर IIT जीती ही नहीं थी. We were chichores. We were the losers. 2 days before the final event, we hosted it in my year. I was the Deputy General Secretary, not the Secretary. Jaggi was the Secretary. 2 days before, we won the football. Then one of my good friends, Vineet Khosla, beat the Kharagpur guy in table tennis. We are about 3 points behind. Final 10-point athletics. Last race, 4 into 100. Last point, if you won that, we would win the championship. I get the baton because I was a 200, 400 meter. So I was the 200 meter champion. So I gave the baton. It was still second. The guy in front was Sardar, usne liya. He was still second, but I saw the Kharagpur cut into our lane. They got disqualified, we won for the first time in the history of IIT. So these things were things which anchored me.
This could be a movie script now. You should actually think of, a parallel track.
Yeah, you're from Kharagpur. Kharagpur was the dadas at that time because it was the oldest IIT. और खड़गपुर वालों को कुछ काम होता नहीं, वो पीछे जंगल में पड़े रहते हैं, तो I couldn't let that slip. So I would say that those things anchored me, and then I agree with you that my journey from there to Schlumberger was very earthing. I mean, क्योंकि मैं पहले दिन यमन चला गया, यमन में 1 साल रहा। यमन was a God forsaken place, the back of beyond. वहाँ से हम स्कॉटलैंड मेरी पोस्टिंग हो गई. I was right under the Arctic Circle. When we used to go on the Super Shuma helicopter for 2 hours, it was literally a 2-hour flight into the darkness because in the winters the sun we would never see.
But I want to say something. He is really underselling himself. IIT Delhi, the year he got it, there were only $2 jobs. The 2 jobs at Schlumberger. The entire batch would work 4 years to get those $2 jobs. He talked about Jaggi. Jaggi is my senior. 35 years later, he's still working for Schlumberger. Right? That is what a Schlumberger job meant and means to an IIT. So don't play it down.
Thank you.
People work 4 years for it. $1 job होती थी, $40,000 की. बाकी सारी की सारी ₹40,000 की होती थी.
So that is true. My father, when he heard the job, my grandfather was not very in favor of private sector. Then he said, कितना जॉब है तुम्हारा? $40,000. मतलब $40,000 है? हाँ ठीक है, चलो चले जाओ. Thank you.
No, but yeah, that's what I said. It's remarkable. So all those things are which would make you gravitate to the West rather than come back. So that you have is remarkable. But it couldn't have been an easy decision to come back. But before I get you to talk about it, let me ask Gauri, who's here. She would have been a part of the decision making, and how did you view this whole thing of chucking up? I think you were staying in London then, or you were in and out of India?
No, we were at that time in Nigeria.
Okay.
So we got
So
married
that's a little bit easier then.
No,
Before you came back.
before you came back, yeah, we were in London.
Yeah,
So it
so
was a
it-
tough decision.
It wouldn't have been easy, and you didn't kind of tell him that where are you going, what are you doing, bijli nahi hai, pani nahi hai, everything is here, we want the kids here. So what went through your mind when he and did he kind of announce one day, or did you kind of debate and discuss it over a long period of time? I don't want,
No, it's fine. I
Shashank,
think-
I don't want you looking at her when she gives the answer.
No, I'm fine. With Shashank, most of the time it is his decision. In a way, it's great, but in a way, it's also trying for the rest of the family because I think once he decides, which we all love, क्योंकि एक इंसान में एक जुनून होता है, वो पागलपना होता है, where he says, this is what I'm going to do, and this happened when he was doing the train journey, the first one. पूरा हिंदुस्तान कल्चरल प्रोग्राम से सेलिब्रेट कर रहा था. महाशय ने डिसाइड किया चलो हम एक ट्रेन निकालेंगे. We said, what, a full train? It was unheard of कि एक बकायदा 16 coaches की एक train निकाली जाएगी. So with Shashank, it's always these very interesting moments that he comes up with a lot of conviction. And there are a lot of wives sitting here, and I'm sure थोड़ी देर आप झगड़ा करोगे कि क्या कर रहे हो यार. But then वो जो जुनून है, जो पागलपना है, and I always say that जिंदगी एक बार आती है, जी लो उसे. So sort of that philosophy has kept me steering with Shashank for so many years. Now we're married for 34 years. And we do have this little tug of war, but chal dete. So in a way it was a tough decision. But what is also lovely with Shashank, I have a very different profession. I'm an artist and I dance. हम कहते हैं कि बहुत कम लोग हैं यहाँ पे जो वो practice करते हैं. I do Kathak, and I have a company, a lot of students are trained. So for me to move from London took 2 years. I couldn't cut the umbilical cord because I always say that we are artists, we are also entrepreneurs. We are not paid salaries. आपके लिए easy है to say, okay, now I'll move from here into Schlumberger and then I'll move to PwC. हमारा जो काम है वो emotions पे based है. हमारा काम लोगों को लेके चलना होता है. एक तालीम है. You don't believe, we don't have an object that we can please, but we have an attitude and approach and a parampara जो हम लेके आगे बढ़ते हैं. So that was great with Shashank. He said, no, Gauri, take your time. But India is where we're going to move. So it took me a little time to, cut my umbilical cords in a different way. I was a resident artist at the very prime place called the South Bank Centre, working with Sadler's Wells in London. Huge amount of work for an Indian artists coming from India and creating foundation of the arts in its true tradition in London. So for me to move away from that took a little time. But Tita, when we came back, great, we came back because a little bit of that journey as well. I trained, my father is here today, and my mother is my guru. वो भी एक बहुत अच्छा एक परंपरा है. Or it was great we came back because I could just spend more time with her. I could retrain myself. I could structure her parampara, her work, which was set from the 1940s. So it gave me a chance to reinvent my own art form, reconnect with India, and come back into my solo work and my traditional work back again. So in a way, there was both the sides, but I do commend Shashank and his Pagalpana and Junoon, which has kept all of us and the family fully ignited, which is wonderful. Thank you.
Let me ask you a very difficult question at this time. Would you have come back if she said, I'm not coming to and following you to India?
So I think
So
Gauri...
first Gauri said something. Gauri, what is your reaction to
No,
that?
she said, see, the context is that she knew or knows that if I had stayed there, I would be terribly, terribly unhappy, right? So she knew that. So to that extent, she knew that this was inevitable, right? There was no question about it. I mean, I had already started the train journey, world's largest train journey of taking entrepreneurs from tier 2, tier 3, sitting in London, in South Kensington, was a bit oxymoronic. So I think that was also something which, she realized. I guess for two reasons, which one she said, one she hasn't. One is the fact that, her art form was at the peak at that time, and then she had to kind of remake all of it. I think the second thing is, generally speaking, women find it more difficult in India, generally speaking. They get more freedom in places like London. So I think that is also the case that one has to accept. I think the good news is that I managed to deposit Gauri literally 1 minute away from her parents. You have to give me that credit. And frighteningly close to my in-laws, although she'll never like that. But I think the final thing is that our kids loved it. They have enjoyed both their Nana Nani and the Dada Dadi. And this book is dedicated to all four of them, by the way. So I think that was one of the best things that happened to both of us, both me and Gauri. I think she'll agree with that entirely. And both our kids, wherever they're going to go globally is fine, but they will be so grounded, not because of me and Gauri, but because of their Nana Nani, Dada Dadi.
So either that was a very clever move or she negotiated really well. But anyway, I'm glad you're here and you started the journey, and maybe we'll kind of talk a little bit about the train journey itself. So, you said it's a 15-day journey and you very quickly kind of mentioned these stops. So just walk me through this. So what do the young adults, girls and young men and young women do during these 15 days? Where do they assemble? Do they kind of, is there some reading before they get onto it? What is the basis of your selecting them? Just walk us through some of those aspects
So firstly,
of the journey.
I would say, yeah. Route. Yeah. So selection of the route, I just firstly want to say all of you are invited to the journey. You don't have to be there for 15 days. As a founder, I can arrange for it to be slightly less. I think the main thing is though that you learn so much from this journey. And I don't think you learn so much from the physical journey as much as the characters on the journey. So having made that thought process, I think the route itself was defined because operationally it's a very tough journey. Had I not been managing offshore drilling rigs for 7 years across the world, I would never be able to pull it off. Anything can go wrong at any point, and essentially the buck stops at people like me and Ashutosh, who's the CEO and all. And I can tell you some, and one or two instances are there in the book also. But the more positive side is that the selection process doesn't take any education qualification into account. We don't think entrepreneurship has much to do with education. I think education is overrated in this country. We have educated ourselves into making huge amounts of clerks. I think, frankly speaking, there's a lady called Chetna Gala Sinha. If you want to hear the other side of the story, hear a TED talk where she says that those women who get educated are less risk-taking than those who are not. That's the indictment for a small town and district. The criteria here is that you should be from a tier 2, tier 3 district where you will get preference. But 20% come from slightly privileged backgrounds, maybe places like this. 10% are very poor also, about 60-70% are there, and 10% are international participants, which is also pretty interesting because they come to India and they travel 15 days on this. We divide them into cohorts of 6:1. Of the 500, 75 are facilitators. Any one of you can be a facilitator, but 20 to 27 is the normal age group. So 6:1. A group of women, 7 women, and a 2 group of 14 men come together in the daytime called a group. The women and men have got separate sleeping apartments. In between there's 2 AC chair cars and there's 2 AC accommodation for people who are dignitaries. There are 2 separate washrooms, and there's a kitchen traveling on the train, and there's storerooms and all that. And essentially this is a self-contained train. We don't allow any role model to serve even a single cup of tea unless it's from the train, because we don't want to burden them with 500 young people showing up at the doorsteps. We go on this journey where the biggest access of learning is interpersonal. The 500 are so well selected that satsang is the best way. You hang out with people for 15 days, your lives change because there are such extraordinary characters in your own Cayman. Second method of learning is going to those role models. like Arvind Eye Care. If anyone hasn't been to Arvind Eye Care, I'd invite him to go. We go every year for the last 15 years. Amazing place. मतलब मेरे तो रोंगटे खड़े हो जाते हैं जब भी जाता हूँ. Dr. V started this eye hospital after retiring from the army at the age of 58. He had arthritis in his hand and he started doing operations with a 30-bed hospital. Now they are the largest eye care center in the world. They have a profit before tax, EBITDA of 40%, and they reinvest all of that into growth of the centers. And they've opened up places elsewhere as well. Similarly, we have places like Gram Vikas, which is talking about water and sanitation. We have Tilonia, which is about other places. So rural areas that we go. So that's the second area. Third is we go to Devariya and we do something called the Bizgyan Tree, which is a business planning competition in that small village, where all 500 flush out to the 10 villages around and they find out what their needs are in areas like education, health, water and sanitation. Come back the same evening, they present that night till about 11 o'clock at night, and then we judge them as to what they're there. And the fourth one is we have these panel discussions at various points where people, eminent people come, Sachin, Benny Bansal have come, Narayan Murthy has come. So essentially we get a panel discussion on subjects like women, technology and other things. So these are four so-called axes of learning as we call it. Of course, what the biggest learning for the participants is they get a very powerful gift that they're not alone, that there are other Buddhus like them, or other people who are thinking about the nation like them. You know, they have been passionate about doing something in their own district. They say, ये बंदा बालासोर का भी ये भी कर रहा है, ये बंदा एर्नाकुलम का ये भी देवरिया का भी ये भी कर रहा है. तो मैं ऐसा नहीं हूँ कि I'm the, because you know entrepreneurship in a tier 2 district is seen upon as something that you're a bit of a maverick to do it, frankly. So now that they have this 500 others, and then over a period of time 7,500 others. I was in a Yatri meet in Bangalore just the other day. Amazing kind of people who are coming up because they are united together. So that in summary is the way we think about the Yatra, and of course the center is another matter, but this is the Yatra.
But it's you're going to the same cities and same places every year. Is that correct? Because I'm sure logistically, as you said, it must be a nightmare if you decide that, okay, you're not going to suddenly take them to Calcutta one year as a variation. But anyway, we'll.
No, that's right. I just want to elaborate. See, for us, it may be monotonous because we go there every year, but for every new batch, it's new. So we believe that that's a safe bet because of the operational issue. I mean, just to know, just to give you a sense of the operations, when you deboard in the morning, let's say in Chennai, for instance, you got 500 people, you have to deboard in 30 minutes, put on 12 buses, take them to the place. There's a traffic guy, get them on the point, get them chai on the location, get them to meet the role model, spend the day there, get them lunch on the location, come back. So it's a fairly wild logistical train ride. So we believe that we want to make sure that some access of risk are, how shall I say, muted, but there's always risk.
So let me ask you a couple of questions with regard to this. One is, over these 15 years, I'm going to ask you, what is the change you've seen in the intake of the students? Is it that they're generally more aware, or is it that, there's a change of a mix, so you've got more people from the smaller cities and towns? Or is it that they're a lot older? Is it that they're a lot more motivated to do it because now they've heard about it, they might have, seen some videos, read some books about it, and therefore are keener to do something like this? Some may be genuinely interested in it. Someone might see it as something good on the CV to get a job at McKinsey or BCG or PwC or whatever. How do you see that change happening? Is there a change? And if there is, how do you see that change?
I think the change is there because in 2008 we started the journey. People used to, I won't say snigger at us, but they'd be very, how shall I say, they felt skilling is enough for middle India. Tier 2, Tier 3 districts, skill कर दो लोगों को, बंदों को job मिल जाएगा बड़े शहरों में, they are fine. They did not believe that entrepreneurship is mainstream or can be mainstream. So that is a major shift. Secondly, the Yatra has become extremely popular amongst young people. I was a strategy leader and we acquired Booz and Company, and I led it for about 4 years called Strategy, and I used to go to Ahmedabad, Bangalore and IIT Delhi and IIT Bombay to recruit. And I would casually mention it ki I found a job. I mean, there was instant applause. There was 120 people in Ahmedabad, I remember one day. All of them pretty much knew about it, and there were 3 Yatris in the crowd. So it has become incredibly popular with the young people. So everyone wants to be in it, and we do a quiz at the beginning of every yatra कि कितने लोगों ने कितनी बार apply किया, किसी ने 7 बार किया, किसी ने 5 बार किया, किसी ने 4 बार किया. So this has become very important, that the popularity of the yatra. And by the way, we have, if I look at the P&L of the yatra, we have spent zero money on advertisement, not because we don't want to, but because we usually don't have the money to do it. And it's all word of mouth. So it's a very powerful presence amongst people as a brand. So that's a big shift. Now let me talk of one or two other shifts. One is women are coming ahead in much larger numbers and much more confident. Number two, you'd be interested to know when they write their essays, who are their role models? Because we ask them. 50% of people from tier 2, tier 3 say, my parents are my role model. Number one. Number three, the first day or so, the urban elite dominates the conversation. The body language is confident. They are the ones who are swaggering about. Then there is something we call a time lifeline. So we ask everyone to tell their time lifeline. एक vertical में आपके highs और low क्या है, यहाँ पर आपका time क्या है. तो मैं भी अपना करता हूँ just to demonstrate कि ये है, ये. So after that, there's a sea change in the behavior of the whole train. Because the 60% silent crowd जो देसी बोलता है, उनकी जब time lifeline दिखी ना, मैं आपको एक किस्सा बताता हूँ. मैं 2017 की यात्रा में या 2016 की यात्रा में कलकेरी संगीत महाविद्यालय एक है इन हुबली, पहला हमारा ड्रॉप था. तो हमने कुछ वो किया, सेल्को वॉज प्रेजेंटिंग, हमने फिर उसके बाद वी वेंट अक्रॉस एंड वी स्टार्टेड हैविंग लंच. पूड़ी सब्जी था, मैं पूड़ी सब्जी खा रहा था. मैं आई यूजुअली वी ऑल फॉर्म अ वेरी इगैलिटेरियन. ये मैं फाउंडर हूँ तो ये नहीं कि मैं आगे जा सकता हूँ, मैं भी लाइन में आता हूँ. तो दो लड़कियाँ मेरे बगल में आके पूड़ी सब्जी खाने लगी एंड दे वर फ्रॉम अ एलीट बैकग्राउंड. आई कुड सेंस इट. अंग्रेजी बोल रही थी. दे वर वेरी क्रेस्ट फॉलन. तो ऐसे क्या हुआ? बोला सर, आई मेट दिस लेडी yesterday and she's 30 years of age, and when she was a young lady who married into her house, her husband and her in-laws would not allow her to go out, but she wanted to do something. She wanted to start an SHG group. तो उसने क्या किया? उसने बोला मैं बीमार हूँ, मैं हॉस्पिटल जा रही हूँ. So करते 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 over a period of 1 year, she went outside and created this SHG group, which today has 10,000 people. करीब 5-6 साल में. And then once it had about 500-600 people, then only she revealed it to her husband and her mother-in-law, who allowed her to say, अच्छा ठीक है भाई, इतना कर लिया. एक बार उसको बैंक अकाउंट खोलना था, तो जाके उसने डॉक्टर से प्रिस्क्रिप्शन ले आई कि उसको कोई मोन पड़े. So these two girls were saying कि they were so inspired by this one, and they were so crestfallen because their problems still yesterday was so insignificant compared to what this girl had done. So this leveling happens around, I think, the time it reaches Kanyakumari. And that's beautiful because then it's a very good exchange, because no doubt people from urban elite are also able to give a lot of gyan because they're much better read, they have more experiences. But this whole idea of this other India doing something fundamental, which was against all existential order, is something that inspires them. So personally speaking, if you were to say 100% learning on the yatra, then I would say 50% is from satsang. 25% is only from the other things.
And tell me, now that you've been doing it for, you've got 7,500 people who've undertaken this yatra. What are they doing after the yatra? Or do they all kind of, go back to doing what they were doing? Or is someone, as you said, some of them become social entrepreneurs, some of them go, are they back to education, back to living their lives? Tell us some about some of the students, what have they gone on to do?
Yeah, I mean, just to complete the last one, and you asked the question, I didn't answer it properly. I think some also go apply to Bain and McKinsey and others, and I just met a girl from McKinsey. She, I was in a flight from Delhi to here, and she ran up to me and she said, "Sir, my life change ho gayi. मैं McKinsey में काम कर रही हूँ, लेकिन, and Bain and BCG and PwC also. So I think that's also there, and we celebrate that. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think we are really motivated by the guy who's from a place in Odisha, who's been fighting Naxals for the last 5 years, comes on the yatra and goes back and still fights Naxals. That is the profile. Coming to your question about what is the
what are the cohorts?
Cohorts. 28%, we did an impact report about 3 years back. 28% have started some enterprise of sort, social or economic. 49%, including the 28%, have done something for the country, like Ashoka Fellow or Gandhi Fellow, or they've gone out and done something. But 51% have gone about their lives like any other person. But I'll give you an example of one of those guys. I was at Niti Ayog because of this G20 yatra. मैं ऐसे ऊपर गया, मैं था, निहाल था, वो भी मेरी यात्री है. एक बंदा भागे भागे आया, उसने बोला, उसने पैर छुआ, उसने बोला सर मेरी लाइफ चेंज हो गई। बोला क्यों? सर मैं 2017 की यात्रा में आया था, मैं यहाँ पर आज काम कर रहा हूँ, उस समय मैं कुछ और करता था, माई होल थिंग इज़ देयर। सो दिस लाइफ चेंजिंग थिंग is also very much part of everyone's life, even if he's in a corporate world, like this girl who came up to me from McKinsey. So I would say that what it gives you is a sense of oneness with the country, which is very rare unless you go and travel the whole country in one. And I say in the book that, in 1968, William Anners had this photograph of the Earth from the moon, which showed the Earth as a fragile planet relative to the lunar landscape. When people see the country as one, they have a new sense of ownership. And that sense of ownership is probably one of the biggest things, apart from the satsang part that I was talking about.
So, on this journey and students, the people doing, the travelers doing something, the good example is Gandhi. Before he came back and began his, what he did in India, the Satyagraha, etc., and Dandi March, Satyagraha, etc., he kind of traveled. But you also have another example of Shea, who kind of traveled in the motorcycle and saw the country and decided that he's going to take up arms. You're not worried about that happening? Someone, your students kind of going the other way? Or it's not happened so far, so I guess it's really not a real risk at this stage.
No, but I think it's a fair question, because one of the things we do at very early age and early time in the yatra is we talk about positive freedoms. And I quote a guy called Tom Keller. What he says is that freedom is not the absence of restrictions, it's finding the right ones. And very often after the independence, we think of Inqilab Zindabad as the moniker for young people going out there and protesting. And I said something in the fifth yatra, which became a bit of a song for the CEO at that time, Suyog Bhavre, that protest is important, but building is far more important. But building is much more difficult, because to get the flywheel of building going, you have to make an effort. So instead of thinking about protesting about health, education, can you do something about it? And we say very openly in the yatra that if protest is in your native, I think the yatra is not for you. So it's unlikely that a Shea will come out of this thing. I think it'll be more a person who, I'll give you something which I say in the book also. Anna Hazare is somebody I have a great amount of respect for, because I went in 1997 to Ralegaon Siddhi with 250 young people. But this time, for the yatra, a lot of people said, should we bring Anna on the yatra? And we debated this a lot. And we finally said no. He's now somebody who's got an anti-corruption agenda. And by the way, anti-corruption on its own has got a lot of merit. No issue. But on our platform, it doesn't have too much of merit. We want people who are saying, if I have to do something, how do I make sure that it gets done through a solution rather than just protesting about it?
I can go on and on, but let me kind of throw it open to the audience at this stage. There's a lot you've said for us to digest, but I'm sure they'd be curious and they'd have a set of questions. So, Ashmita, there. Alok, Ashmita, anything?
Can I?
Sure.
More than a question, this is a kind of experience sharing. I'm Dr. R. Ramakrishnan. I was invited by Shashank for an event which was in Mumbai in terms of flagging off a yatra. So all these people had come from various places, and the whole energy around that, when the yatra song was portrayed with giant flags of India being waved in the audience, with a kind of a dance event choreographing this entire spirit of the yatra, and Gauri holding center stage and inspiring people to sing the yatra song, mere to rongte khade ho gaye. To be frank, I shed a few tears of joy experiencing this pivotal moment of inspiring tomorrow's India. I saw that happening in front of my eyes. And then I had another proud privilege. During that time, after that, I spent some time with all those people, asked them what are their expectations from this yatra, what do they want this yatra to do to them, what do they want to do as yatris. And I got a set of answers. I was curious and I told Shashank, listen, I want to meet them later, either in Ahmedabad or whatever, not the same batch, maybe another batch. And Shashank was kind enough on the 10th anniversary of the Yatra. We had an event at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And he invited me and my wife to meet everyone at Delhi on that occasion. And on that occasion, the Yatris had already gone around half the country. And when they came in and then they had interacted with each other and they had shared experiences, I asked them, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What have you learned? You know, the kind of work they have done as individuals in terms of self-help groups, as individuals in terms of the field of education, as individuals in the area of community development, was something that was to be seen, to be believed. And then there were some people who had said that they were Yatris in 2016 or they were Yatris in 2019 or whatever. And there were people, I mean, I think many of them are still my friends and have their numbers. And somebody found that, I was interested in bird photography. And then he said, listen, sir, I am from this village in Maharashtra और आप कभी आए तो मुझे बताइएगा सर मैं आपकी बहुत अच्छा sighting करा दूंगा and things like that. And I called him. When I went to Big One, I called him. And before I went to Big One, I said, भैया sighting कैसी है, birding कैसा है, क्या हो रहा है? Somebody in Odisha and things like that. So let me put it to you like this. I think at the end of the day, any change that happens through experiential process. No matter तुम classroom में बैठाओ उसको एक साल उसको सिखाओ, but in this 14 days of togetherness, bonding, respect for each other, giving space to each other, understanding, sharing, boss, it's a phenomenal catharsis. And I think kudos to you, Shashank, for being able to do this consistently, passionately, despite all the corporate pressures, despite you must ask him about what he wants to do in terms of nation building and some of the other things. I'm sure you will come to that. That's another inspiring part of what he is attempting to do. In that journey also, we wish you all success and good fortune. But Shashank, meeting you and meeting the Yatris has been one of the most lovely experiences in my life. Thank you so very much.
I didn't know who you were, and I came here with, because Amit was here really, and I'll leave with a sense of awe, both of you and what you've done, and also you, Gauri, in the South Bank, who gave all that up to come back to India with him as well. The second is a little bit more facetious. Your description of Mumbai, or Bombay, as the hustle of the North and the integrity of the South is very amusing, but I mean, that's a conversation for somewhere else. No. And the question is, you said, I'm not going to go into what you do and what you've done. That's awe-inspiring. My question really is, you say your cohorts are 40% women and 60% men. How was that at the beginning and how is it changing? Because it's very good that we are 40, but how do you see that changing in the future?
I mean, I'd like to get it to 50%, and we did in two occasions. On the case of both the COVID thing and the 2017 Yatra when Ram was there, we actually managed to get the percentage 50%. And I think it's not only because we want affirmative action. I think it's because genuinely it helps us. And I think it'll help the country also if we were to do a similar thing in policy matters. Because one of the things I've written here is a full chapter on women, including a version of what we managed to do for our two daughters. You know, when I grew up, I had an Upanayan Sanskar, a Jainu ceremony. And my sister didn't go through that. So when I grew up, I realized that at some point, when boys are brashly stepping into adulthood, women are being excluded, micro exclusions. So we organized the Upanay and Sanskar for our two daughters in my village, and Kiran Bedi, who's a well-wisher, came to our town to bless that. The point I'm making is that in the same chapter, I talk about women as balance sheet builders. Men are profit and loss. Women, if you give them 100 rupees, will put them to the education of children, to the dress of a girl child or something else. Boys will, at least 20% will go to pan bidi tambaku. So this is also genuine, and I think the balance sheet voice we hear always on the train. And there's a very interesting incident. Jude, who was the previous director or the head of South Bank Center, she noticed something which we did not. So she's come on the train journey thrice. So on the second journey, she said that in the AC chair car where we present, the boys were standing in the front, the girls were behind. They had more to say, and they would part the wall of boys, come up there, say something, and go back. So we said, Jude, why didn't you talk to everyone? We went to Tilonia, and she stood up there, and all 500 of us. And actually, the boys had not also noticed. So this was blind spots that the boys also didn't know about. So to a certain extent, unless we also remove some blind spots, how do men think about women? I don't think there's any intrinsic pushback. How do we make sure that they are by the same side? So those are some of the things that I believe in. So my hope and belief is that from 40% it can go to 50%. And maybe I'm personally vested because I have two girls. But I think generally speaking, I think it's right for the country.
So I'm very mindful of the time, so we'll kind of go through the last leg of this, try and do it pretty quickly, though it's kind of equally, can do with an equally intensive amount of treatment. So this book, Middle of Diamond India. So, when you kind of look at some of the other literature, you kind of say that there are about 10% who are, maybe 15% who have a lot of money to spend, and you've got 40% at the bottom of the pyramid. So there's this great middle in between who kind of, to put it in very crudely, have a little bit more money than the products which are being offered to them or the opportunities which are presented to them. So will you kind of walk us through your hypothesis? What is the central theme which you have in this book? Clearly, as management consultants, everyone talks about bottom of the pyramid, but you've kind of suddenly kind of spoken about the diamond and bringing a shine to polishing the stone and bringing it to resemble a diamond or be actual a diamond, strong enough to be a diamond. So just talk about your hypothesis here and what is it that I know you refer to bits and pieces about what you have in the book, but maybe if you can give us an overview about it. And it's coming and once it's out next month, I'm sure most of us in this room, I for one, will certainly be inspired to get hold of a copy and then track you down to sign it. But
we will do another book launch here, which is going to be probably more prosaic one, not as cozy as this. So the middle of the diamond is as follows, that if there are 1.4 billion people in this country at this point, then about 200 million at the top, you could argue, are reasonably well off by Indian standards. The real cream at the top is probably only 50 million. I mean, the real rich people, if that. Then there is 350 to 400 million at the bottom of the diamond who are poor by any standards. And I'll quantify this. But there's 800 million people, 11% of global humanity, which is neither very rich today, nor are they very poor. They don't have the issue of, I don't have a roof on my head or food on the table. They have other problems, and those problems usually are about aspiration. And this is not necessarily middle class, which is at the bottom of the top and the top of the middle. This is more middle India. Emerging middle class is a better definition. So if I was to quantify that, and I may get this slightly off, but essentially on a PPP basis, the top is $15,000, the middle is $6,000, and the bottom is $3,000 on a PPP basis. 6,000 is also the average income of India, as it so happens, on PPP basis. So on a real term basis, it's $2,200 or so at this point in time. So I think that's one definition. The other definition, which is also equally interesting, is that if you look at the 750 districts that comprise that 1.4 billion people, then 240 districts, tier 2, tier 3 districts, have got about 570 million, 780 million people or so. So that's also almost the 800, approximately. So somehow if you look at both these diamonds, one is a district diamond, the other one is more a income diamond, it has become a diamond. And therefore, there are three biases which slow us down, and I talk about in the book, which damage our democracy. Number one, we believe that the people in the middle are a liability, whereas they are actually an asset. So we should not be showering them all with grants and subsidies and roti, kapda, makan. They've gone beyond that. If we have some extra money, then we should reserve it for the safety net for the 400 at the bottom who truly deserve it. By spraying it across that 400 plus 800, we are doing disservice to our country because the safety net is required. The second is we believe that these guys don't have aspirations. Actually, they have a lot of aspirations. I mean, at some risk, I have quoted the case of Tata Nano, where if Tata Nano, which was important to have a 1 lakh car, had it been a yellow car or a smart car or a woman car, it would have made more of an appeal than just saying it's a cheap car. Like? I like my kurta. This, by the way, is my standard dress. So I'm seen in this. And I think it's that thinking of aspiration rather than the basics. And even our center that we've designed, I mean, we've designed it aspirationally, absolutely as if it was anywhere. Otherwise, वो छोटे गांव शहर में क्या है, वो रेड ब्रिक बिल्डिंग बना दो. वो किसने बताया, वो कोई साहब थे, बाहर से आए थे, उन्होंने बोला था कि जो भी चीज़ यहाँ पर करो वो IIM अहमदाबाद की तरह होनी चाहिए, उसमें सिर्फ ब्रिक बिल्डिंग वाली होनी चाहिए. भाई किस उल्लू ने बोला है करने के लिए? जो वहाँ का बंदा है देवरिया का, गोरखपुर का, उसको भी उतनी ही उम्मीदें हैं कि भाई मैं भी अच्छी जगह रहूँगा. आपने उसको कन्फाइन कर दिया अपने उसमें. सो दिस आई थिंक आइडिया ऑफ confining these people to aspirationally low things is something which is second bias. The third bias, which I think the most important and arguably the most well hidden, is the societal and social trauma that this middle has been inflicted because they were the ones who stood up for independence. रजवाड़ों ने तो समझौता कर लिया था. Nobody at the top rose. 1857 is all about lower middle class men rising from Purvanchal. बलिया के थे. विवेक जी बलिया के हैं. बलिया से वहाँ से उठे, वहाँ पर उन्होंने बरकपुर परेड ग्राउंड पे 29 मार्च 1857 को अंग्रेज़ों को सामने से गोली मारी. उस समय कंपनी बहादुर को आंख उठा के नहीं देख सकता था. This kind of thing the British got absolutely flabbergasted. उसके पहले पुरबिया soldiers were the backbone of the Bengal army. All Anglo-Afghan war is fought by पुरबिया soldiers, all of it. अगर कोई आर्मी सही थी वो बंगाल आर्मी थी. मद्रास तो बाद में आई, बॉम्बे तो बाद में आई. Bengal army was a mainstay. All Purabia soldiers were disbanded, and the whole concept of martial races was created. कि भाई martial races कहाँ से? वो पंजाब से आएंगे. पंजाब क्योंकि वहाँ से उनको सहायता मिली. अच्छा, आई एम नॉट ब्लेमिंग पंजाब. जब जरूरत हुई तो पंजाबों के अगेंस्ट उन्होंने नेपालीज को खड़ा कर दिया. Divide and rule was a classic method of the British to make sure that 90 years after 1857, that place was governed with an iron fist. So when we talk about the social trauma of these places, when we see how the administration behaves with them even today, you will feel as if you're back to Cornwallis in 1793. So I think these three traumas are something that we should talk more about. The dark irony of independent India is that the colonial towns, which collaborated most with the British, are prosperous today. We are sitting in one. And those who fought for independence are backward. And it's not about Purvanchal. Santhal rebellion, Birsa Munda, Jharkhand में, Rani of Kattur. Every place where there was a rebellion today is backward. You name it, they're backward. And every village there was extraction happening. ये सब मुंबई, चेन्नई was a colonial capital. आप कलकत्ता चले जाइए, आप बेंगलोर चले जाइए. सब लोगों ने पैसा हड़प के बनाया उस समय जब हम लोग के पास आज़ादी की लड़ाई लड़ी जा रही थी. And I've said this very explicitly in my book. It may cause some discomfort to people in these big cities. That is a fact. So I think I don't think this is a time to be vindictive. I think this is a time to join forces. The top, like we see in the Yatra, has got tremendous amount of energy. They have sansadhan. The middle has tremendous amount of aspirational energy. Let's combine the two. Let's pull the bottom out much faster because after COVID, the bottom has also suffered. And I think we will create a new country at a time where the Amrit Kal is really genuinely going. And I can also say one thing in the passing. This is the last chance. 20 years from now, what is happening to China will happen to us. We will start aging. And that is not the time that we have to start the rise. Now is the time. And hence the point that we have to do something quickly, rapidly, not just by Sarkar, not just by private sector, but by everyone. We have to bring nation building to the center of our drawing room.
So you feel so passionately about it. Are you do you have some political ambitions, or do you think that, getting into politics is, for some other, people not like us? But I'll come back. I feel you do feel passionately about it, and therefore, do you see some role for yourself in that?
Yes, I do. And I think there's a strong chance that if the stars align, I will contest in 2024. I don't know whether I will get the ticket, but if I do get the ticket, I will. And the reason is simply that I think if we have to make the kind of changes we want to make, we need people who understand that middle matters. And it is not about, by the way, at the end of, and Vivek and Manish know about this, I was the government strategy leader for PwC, and I did a lot of work in Karm Yogi, which is a very big bureaucracy reform process that is being led by the Department of Personnel and Training. So I worked very closely with the establishment officer, Mr. Srinivas, for almost 2 years to define the strategy, and then now it's getting implemented. And one of the things I really pushed, and I still push because I know the Capacity Building Commission officers, that government has to be an enabler. Government has to be Jamwant. It cannot be Hanuman. Citizen has to be the Hanuman. So that whole theory that now that there is enough big middle, you cannot do what welfarism did to Europe after World War II, where they bloated the welfare state from 10% of GDP spent to 50% in the case of France. 35%, 40% in the case of Britain, 35% in the case of USA also, despite Reagan, despite everything else. So how do we make sure that over the next 25 years, not only do we create a great country, we create a country which is sensible about how it uses its republican energies to power this country forward. Not create a bureaucratized state which is going to top down, बड़ी बड़ी चीज़ें ऊपर से नीचे से हम लोग छोटी छोटी चीज़ें करें which are able to do it. That's my hope and belief. It's I mean, if Gauri was afraid of coming back from London to Bombay, she's even more worried about if I was to go into politics, because it's a dirty game. We all know that. But I have that intent. Only time will tell whether I'll succeed, because it's a tricky game. It requires a lot of behavior changes from people like me. I call it politics of development. Trishel here is my manager, who's helping me get funded, make sure that I have a proper political team. The great news is that my entire political team, by the way, Jagrati has nothing to do with it. Jagrati is something which I founded, which is independent. It is run by a chairperson who happens to be senior partner from PwC. It has a CEO who happens to be from IIT Kharagpur. For the last 15 years, he's been with us, and he finds mention in the book. Therefore, I'm the founder, so I'll always be very attached to it, and I'll do a lot. But I think I have a separate team, which is my political team. And I would say 90% of the team is Yatris, because these 7,500 people come up to me and say that if you were to do something in policy and in politics, then we'd like to help you. So I'm very, very blessed to have such a great team. So yes, the answer is very direct, yes.
So that's wonderful to hear, because I know so many people, they dodge and don't answer it clearly. And the other is they say that, yeah, we'll do it, but maybe after we retire from our corporate life. I think what I really admire is the fact that you've kind of given up everything, in a manner of speaking, as we tend to understand it, decided to take a plunge, do something transformative for the country. So more power to you and good luck. And with that, let me wind up the show for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.